If you were watching our slides scrolling by earlier, we do a land acknowledgement at these events, and I'll just read a short version of that CU is on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute nations. Let us acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory and pay our respects to the diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land. Let us also give thanks to the tribal nations and ancestors of this place. And I think that's especially important today with our focus on water and land that we live on. Just very quickly, I wanted to check in the audience. How many folks in the audience are alums of the School of Public Affairs? Okay, current students in the School of Public Affairs? Alums or students of CU Denver generally? Great, welcome all of you. People who use water every day? Okay, kind of everybody, good. I also want to acknowledge our provost, Constancio Nukuma, who does such excellent work for the university, is with us today. We're welcome, Constancio. So let's jump right in. Our panel today is going to be moderated by Chris Weible. Dr. Weible is a star faculty member at the School of Public Affairs who studies water and other kinds of policy conflicts. He has a bunch of roles heading our MPP program right now. He's the head of a new center we have on policy and democracy. He's the head of actually a major university-wide project on building democratic communities with many other faculty across the campus. He's the editor of a very important international journal called Politics and Policy. He's won numerous SPA and campus research awards. A university in Sweden gave him an honorary degree last year, which is something you usually get when you're much older. So please join me in welcoming our moderator, Chris Weible, and our all-star panel.
Hey everybody, thanks Paul. Welcome, and yeah, I'm Chris Weible and happy to be here, and I'll be introducing the panel in a sec. Let me set things up briefly here. I do co-direct our new Center for Policy and Democracy, and a lot of people, they like kind of look around and think about our democracy, and you kind of think, gosh, it doesn't seem to be doing too well. And yeah, and often they'll say, what can we do? And we had an election the other day, and what can a typical person do every day? And you know what? You can do things like this. Show up, because the the bedrock of any democracy is essentially community. People getting along, listening, communicating, being critical with each other, and but also respectful of our differences and similarities. And so I thank you all for showing up here and being part of this community, because it's maybe small, but it makes for a better society. So thank you for being here for that. This is fantastic. And you know what? Yeah, we're here to talk about water. Isn't that kind of cool? And and I don't need to set this up too much. We all consume it, we use it, conserve it maybe. It's also important, obviously for, everything from agriculture to industry or economy, recreation, public health, you name it, it's important to us. Even think of the arts and beauty and how important that is to that in our lives. However, kind of like our democracy, when I Google water, or you kind of look it up, you can see some words associated with it that isn't always positive. Things like climate change. And things like drier, the world's getting these parts of Colorado getting drier or warmer. When I think of dry and warm, I kind of worry about water. Sometimes when you Google things, you find things like increasing demand. That's also kind of scary to me. And then we have something cool. We'll talk about it. The water plan and all this, and government responses. We're working on conservation and things like increasing storage and various other strategies. But then I kind of worry too, because it's not like there's a high level of trust in our society of government right now. And how are we going to implement this? This could be really hard. And sometimes with policies, sometimes there can be winners and losers. And so how do we handle that? Or can we do this so there's kind of win-win situations, which makes it very complicated politically. And this is hard, which, when Paul asked me to moderate, I was like, thank goodness, because I don't want to be on this panel because these are tough challenges. But luckily, we do have three very smart people on this panel. And so I'm going to introduce them now, and we're going to get this started. First, we'll start, I guess we'll go, my left to right. The first is Ándie Trujillo Guajardo, a SPA graduate, which is awesome. Organizational development leader, engineer, public servant. She is dedicated and certified nonprofit public project management, engineering, and organizational development professional, working with communities toward environmental justice. She founded an engineering consulting firm, rural project services with offices in Antonito and Lakewood, Colorado. She has provided access to capital projects in rural communities, brought renewable distributed energy generation online, provided access to safe drinking water and clean water for communities through capital projects. Pretty amazing. All right, one over. Sharon Israel has been active in Colorado for water world for over 20 years, starting her career with the state of Colorado. For the past decade, Sharon has worked in local government with cities of Westminster and Arvada. She also served on the Metro Roundtable during the development of the first Colorado Water Plan as a municipal representative. As the director of utilities of the city of Arvada, she brings a local perspective on water matters. Sharon is a professional engineer with degrees from the University of Maryland, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Stanford University. She earned her certified public manager credentials from the University of the CU Denver School of Public Affairs. Yeah. And she's currently a student in the executive MPA program. Yeah, I'm on her capstone committee. I'm very happy about that. And finally, but not least, of course, is James Eklund, leads the water and natural resources practice of Sherman and Howard. In addition, he helps advise and manage North Sky Ranch, his family's Western Colorado ranch, homestead in 1888. That's pretty cool. When he's not screwing something up on the ranch, James works with sovereign governments, multi-state authorities, state agencies, and private interests to deliver critical water infrastructure projects and design policy regarding water law, natural resources, infrastructure, and environmental protection. In the long ago, James served as Colorado's lead negotiator and signatory to the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan in 2019. As director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board, he was the architect of the Colorado's first water plan in 2015, the largest civic engagement process in state history, and served as legal counsel to Colorado's governor. Wow, right? But, James, are you an MPA grad?
No.
I don't know.
I'll just link out.
We all wear multiple hats and have multiple identities, but you don't have that.
True. That's true.
But this is an amazing panel, and we're going to do this slightly differently today. James is going to start with a presentation to kind of lay the foundation. And the reason I'm not sitting there is because I don't want the PowerPoint to reflect off my forehead. and everyone else can move it so they can see it too.
All right.
And then Sharon and Ándie will give their experiences and perspectives on water, and then we'll kind of do a little bit of engagement, and then questions from the audience.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. I can think of no better audience for this conversation and this time that we're in than this one. Public policy, democracy, all these issues are just part and parcel with water in the West and in our nation generally. And I'm excited to share. You're going to drink from the fire hose here for the next 10 minutes or so, and then you cut me off if I'm still droning on and on. All right, I always start with this map. This is the 100th meridian right here. And everything to the west of this line needs to be irrigated in order to grow. Everything to the east of this line can get by and grow on its own with the humidity, the temperature, and the precipitation that they enjoy east of that line. So that's why when you fly east and you look out your airplane window, and you should all be in window seats when you do that, when you look down, you're going to see center pivots, you're going to see circles until you get to that line, and then you're going to start seeing more rectangles. And the reason you do is because you've got to irrigate things to grow on this side of the line. Well, that's important. The other significant thing about this particular map was drawn by John Wesley Powell, and he was our first USGS surveyor that came out to the West. And this was his idea of how we should carve up states. He said, this business about arbitrary survey lines, that's not going to get it done, because we're going to have all sorts of fights over things like water, other natural resources. We should really do it by basin. So obviously we didn't do that. We went with the tried and true rectangle that we call home. And I might need you to advance it. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to be too impatient. I know there's a delay because I'm far away from the sensor. All right, there we are. That's our state. You couldn't have drawn a better rectangle around the headwaters of the West than this one. Now, it just so happens it's an accident because when President Lincoln and President Grant were trying to lock up the state's mineral resources for the Union during the Civil War, they drew this out of the Oklahoma and Utah and the territories that Colorado was not a shape like this prior to that. So here it is a little bit more blown up. You can see the headwaters of all of our rivers. The Colorado River main stem is the brownish blob there, and you are here, right there, in the South Platte Basin. You got the Republican, the Arkansas, the Rio Grande, the San Juan, the Yampa White Green system, the Gunnison Uncompahgre is in there. And so you really do have the epicenter of water in the West. 18 downstream states in the country of Mexico get water that starts in your state. And so when it comes to water policy, we punch above our weight. When it comes to population, we're not very big. California is 40 million people. On a good day, we're 6.5. So it's a kind of a good place for us to start. And if we get this right, a lot of other jurisdictions are going to benefit. If we get this wrong, it's also true that there's a lot of people that are going to be upset. And so we've got a lot of eyeballs on us, and our public policy people, you people in this room, people online, you're who are going to have to deal and grapple with solutions to the challenges that we're going to go through as a panel. All right. If maybe I don't yap so much during each slide, it'll transition better. Okay, here we go. Here's the Colorado River Basin. Everything to the west of the Continental Divide in our state goes into this basin. Everything to the east goes into the Gulf of Mexico, either through the Mississippi River system or the Rio Grande. So what we have here is a big basin, 243,000 square miles, 40 million people. If you just took this basin as its own country, it would be the 5th largest GDP in the world. It's national food security. If you eat a salad or anything on the table back there that is green in this month or anytime during the winter, 90% of the green things we eat in this country come from the Yuma or the Imperial Valley. That's a very important stat, because to think that we can just point our finger down at the lower basin because they have overused, that is indisputable, the resource here. We can't just say they have to fix this whole problem unless we want to go to every restaurateur, catering company, and grocery store in Denver, Manhattan, you name it, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and tell them, we're not going to be able to get you the food that you want to sell to your customers because we have decided that we're going to take agriculture out of production in the lower basin of the Colorado River. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I'm going to connect you to the Bay Area and why those atmospheric rivers you've all been reading about that have been slamming into the Bay Area for every Tuesday for the last 14 Tuesdays, there's been an atmospheric river or some heavy precipitation in the Bay Area and the Sierra Nevada. You've seen the pictures from Lake Tahoe where you've got snow burying the ski resorts, the ski lifts that are there. So step one is transmountain diversions. We move about 500 to, I'm going to talk about acre feet. I think the panel will probably reference acre feet when we're talking today. An acre foot of water is you go to where the Broncos are going to play better football this coming year, and you fill it up a foot full of water, just cut off the end zones, just 100 yards in between the two goal lines. That is a foot full, that is an acre foot of water. And that's enough for about 3 to 4 average size households for 1 year. Can get by on 1 acre foot of water. We move 500 to 600,000 acre feet of water from the Colorado River Basin, where 80% of our state's precipitation is, to the Front Range, which is where 90% of our population is. So we move 500 to 600,000 acre feet a year of water from this Colorado River that cuts through these 7 states and into the Republic of Mexico, 29 tribes, by the way, land recognition, I always try and do this earlier in the presentation, but my family's ranch that was alluded to earlier was settled on Ute Indian land, and there's not a day that's gone by since 1888 when we homesteaded there that somebody on our place hasn't given thanks and appreciated the stewardship that got us the resource that we are now privileged to manage. So it's critical that whether we're in Denver or on the Western Slope in this basin, we understand that there are lessons to be learned by people who have far, far more experience than we do managing this resource. This is the, so we got a 100-year-old law of the river exactly last year, 1922 is when we signed the compact. So 50 years ago, when this school was founded, 1973, we've had 50 years of really wild growth. And I'm going to get into that as quickly as I can here in a second. But 20 years of aridification have occurred on this basin. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But 50 years ago, 1973, they started construction of the Central Arizona project, which is this guy right here. It diverts water to Phoenix and Tucson. And it is the reason that Arizona has grown at the clip it has grown. If it just relied on its native supplies, it would not be the size it is today. You also have the Colorado River Aqueduct that goes through Southern California and brings water to Southern California. The other place Southern Californians get their water is the State Water Project that brings water from the Bay Delta and the Sierra snowmelt. That is what gets you to the Bay Area in 4 steps: the Trans Mountain diversions, the river itself, the Colorado River Aqueduct in Southern California, and then the State Water Project. That's really what makes the great snowpack that they've gotten this year in California matter to you. Because if you cut this off, and we have done that in recent memory, we have said, because the endangered species impacts are so acute in the upper base, in the Bay Delta, that we will not allow the State Water Project in California to pump water down to the Southern California area, which is just like Colorado. You got the vast majority of your precipitation up here in this part of the state. The vast majority of the population's down here. So if you cut that off, it puts a bullseye on the Colorado River. And that makes it very difficult from a management perspective, because you've got 25 million people that are predicated on releases of water from Lake Mead. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But more on this thing that just happens to have occurred, and construction got underway in 1973, 50 years ago. We cut this river in half in 1922. And we said 7.5 million acre feet will be allowed in the upper basin in consumptive use, and 7.5 million acre feet in the lower basin will be used for consumptive use. In 1944, we came along and said 1.5 million acre feet will be attributable to Mexico. So you add those numbers up, 16.5 million acre feet, everybody's happy. And I can go home, we can all rest easy. We don't have to take up any more of your morning. Problem is, we don't have 16.5 million acre feet. When the compact was negotiated, the average on this river inflows were 20 million acre feet. We thought we had a 20 million acre foot river. So it was reasonable to carve it up into apportionments that added up to 16.5 million acre feet. That was a rational thing to do. So there's a lot of people that run around saying that the compact negotiators had it wrong, they screwed up. They were playing with the best data they had at the time, and they didn't have climate change to deal with the way we do today. Well, since 2000, we've seen more like 10 and a little bit less than 10 million acre feet. In fact, 2000 to 2021 adjusted unregulated inflows into Lake Powell were 8.4 million acre feet. So we've cut this river in half, and you can't play by the same, infrastructure and rules that you set up for a 20 million acre feet river and apply those to a 10 million acre feet river and make everybody happy. And so that's what we're dealing with. This is from the New York Times. The line is instructive. You can't see it too well, but there are these shadows, and these shadows are above 17.5 million acre feet. They gave the lower basin another 1 million acre feet, I think, because they've got, so many golf courses in Palm Springs. How many golf courses do you think there are in Palm Springs? Just quick trivia question. This is great for a cocktail party. Anybody?
10.
40, 10, 118. There's 100, there are 110, and then this is last year they built 8 more. So that's how many, that's what we're doing in this basin. It's recycled water, just like the Bellagio fountains are recycled water, but it gives you an idea of the scale and the throw weight that is available in this basin. Okay, so Lake Powell is our bucket, Lake Mead is theirs. These are the 2 largest reservoirs in our nation, and we have seen them drop precipitously. These are key elevations in Glen Canyon Dam, which is what makes Lake Powell. 3525 is the elevation that we said in 2019, when I was negotiating on the state's behalf, we didn't want to go below this line. We thought that was a no-fly zone because you start impacting the ability to generate hydroelectric power. And this is clean power that goes to, it's load following power. So when you come home in July in Arizona and you flip on your air conditioner, or Western Colorado, and you flip on your air conditioner, those electrons need to be ramped up, and the sun's not usually shining at that time of day, and the wind may not be blowing. So you need load following power that can follow that demand, or you have to replace it on the spot market, and it is incredibly expensive to do so. And it's probably dirty energy. So if we wanted to, what we really wanted to do was avoid any impact to hydropower by not going below this line. If you go below 3490, you can't produce a single electron out of this reservoir. Here's Lake Powell the last 5 years, and this black line is where we are now. And this is even, this little bump right here is all this snow that you've been seeing out your window and skiing on, I hope. It is not going to save the day. We are below 3525. We're closer to 3520. In fact, I'll tell you exactly where we are. As of this morning, we were at 3521.29. That's 22% of full capacity of the reservoir. And that's why when you fly over it, you see a bathtub ring, and you see one at this reservoir as well. Hoover Dam backs up Lake Mead, and it is similar elevations are listed here. Power cutoff here is 950. And that means no hydroelectric power out of this dam, probably out of Davis Dam as well, to the entire state of Arizona and California. And that's a big issue. And Las Vegas, if you like to go to Las Vegas. So here's the 5-year traces for Lake Mead, and that's where we are right now. So we're quite a bit of ways away from the dead pool at Lake Mead, but we are perilously close to the system dropping, the bottom dropping out from underneath the system. That's the takeaway from this. Even with the robust snowpack that we have enjoyed this year, and don't get me wrong, that's wonderful to have, but it is not going to save us. We would need 4, 5, maybe 6 years like this, back to back to back to back, in order to recover these reservoirs. Where at Lake Mead is at 1045, so 29% full. So here's what we did. And I know I'm running up against time here, Chris. I can feel your eyes burning into me. So in 2002, we had drought, big drought, worst drought on record. We had to do something. Secretary of the Interior said, states get together and figure out how we're going to manage this drought. So we got 5 years. We took us 5 years to negotiate this, but we got something called the 2007 interim guidelines. All 7 states agreed to it. The federal government ratified it. We're good to go. We thought we had bought ourselves until 2026 with that agreement. And then we were going to get back around the table and negotiate and see if that was good enough for us. Well, we didn't make it to 2026. We made it to about 2011, 2012. And we reran the numbers, and we realized we're not going to make it. The feds, again, came back and said, states, do this work, or we will do it for you. And you may not like what we want, what we're going to tell you to do. So we got together, and again, 5 years later, came up with the drought contingency plan in 2019. That's me smiling like an idiot on top of Hoover Dam, because I thought we had just solved this problem for the next, till 2026, when we were supposed to get back around the table again, right? Well, we didn't make it to 2026. we made it to about 2022, and this is a picture of the Commissioner of Reclamation at a June press conference, or a June Senate Environment and Natural Resources Committee meeting in Washington, where she said, the states need to come up with 2 to 4 million acre feet in additional cuts, or we're going to come up with those cuts for you. And instead of having 5 years, you've got 5 weeks. August 15th was the deadline. August 15th came. August 15th went. What was after August? The election. So the federal government had an opportunity or a choice to make. Are we going to tell the states, are we going to use the hammer we've threatened or not? And they chose not to. So they didn't do anything in August. And they said, okay, well, maybe we'll do something after the election when things aren't so politically volatile. And so we thought maybe at the end of January, we would get a federal pronouncement. We didn't get that either. We got the federal government asking the states for their thoughts on how to solve this. And the states huddled multiple times in Denver, Vegas, Southern California, and couldn't get there. The states failed to do what they did in 2007, failed to do what they did in 2019. They instead decided, well, we're going to have to just kind of guard our own turf. 6 of the states, minus California, came up with a letter. And they asked the federal government, they said, we're not agreeing to any of this. We're just asking you to model what would happen if the following scenario were to play out. And then tell us what the modeling looks like. California, so it was 6 states minus California, California wrote their own letter. And they said, we will voluntarily take cuts, but we are senior on this river. And that's the important takeaway. And then I'm going to stop. We're senior on this river because California says that because in 1973, the construction of the Central Arizona project was enabled because of a concession that Arizona made to California. They said, we will be junior, we will subordinate our water rights to your water rights. If there's ever a shortage on this river, Arizona will take the cuts. Arizona and Nevada will take all the cuts before you take a drop of cut. Because back in 1973, they thought we've got a 16.5 to 20 million acre foot river. They never thought we would be in this position. So they thought it was sleeves out of the vest. Turns out it wasn't. And now we're here in this situation where we do have real shortages that have to be apportioned. 2 to 4 million acre feet is a lot of water. And the states are retreating to their respective corners. This is the upper basin's position. Dust off the System Conservation Pilot Program. Back when we ran that, when I was at the CWCB in 2014, 2015, and 2016, we came up with over 3 years, 6 million acre feet of water, or 6,000 acre feet of water, which is the proverbial drop in the bucket. The next idea was, well, we'll release water from higher reservoirs like Aspinall and Flaming Gorge and Navajo. 500,000 acre feet of water can be sent down, but then that's a kind of a one-time, there's one bullet in that chamber. And once you shoot it, you don't get it back until you recover those reservoirs. So that's 500,000 acre feet, but we've already done that. We can consider an upper basin demand management program, but it's consider, and we want to investigate it, and they're not complete. That's going to get us 0 acre feet right now. If we measure better, that's going to get us 0 acre feet. If we continue our water administration, that's 0 acre feet of savings that was asked for by the secretary and the commissioner. That's our challenge. We have natural infrastructure. I'm going to end positively. We've got natural infrastructure that sits underneath. This is the Denver Basin. That's Denver. Up here's Fort Collins. Down here's Pueblo. Or Colorado Springs. We have this big aquifer that sits underneath our feet that we could be managing just the same way that Phoenix and Tucson are managing their aquifer, or Orange County. Orange County puts 200 acre feet a day down the hole into their aquifer. We barely scratched the surface of this. So there are opportunities. I'm not all doom and gloom. There is a way out of this box. We are the headwater state. As my grandfather liked to say, it's better to be upstream with a shovel than downstream with a lawyer. And he's right. And this is when he knew I was going to law school. So ultimately, this is an existential threat to the basin. Just as Winston Churchill faced in May of 1942 with the Nazi peril, we face an existential threat, and we have to figure out how we're going to navigate it. The status quo will not get it done. So you can vilify all you want, other people, other parts of the basin, different parts of government, Wall Street, Main Street, ag, urban. If you divide, you will hang separately. If you don't, we've got to hang together if we're going to solve this problem. So this is the quote I'll leave you with. I know I've blown past time, Chris, so let's get the panel up here so that they can react to this rambling mess I've created. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the great overview. Now we're going to go to Ándie and have her.
Oh, you want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, it doesn't matter to me, actually.
What do you think,
Since you're sitting on
Ándie?
my right.
You want me to go first? Okay.
You're talking about a metro area.
Okay. I brought a copy of Colorado Water Plan.
Yay!
Yeah, I was thinking of asking James to sign it maybe later. This is actually the new one, 2023, hot off the presses. The last one was
2015.
2015. Thank you. I didn't need to touch you with coffee. So I appreciated that Dean Teskey asked y'all to raise your hands if you use water, right? I won't ask you to do it again. We all use water. And you heard James talk about regional Western US water challenges. A lot of the issues on the Colorado River, James talked about the issues that are addressed in the Colorado Water Plan. They're about water supply. They're about wet water in our reservoirs drying up, in our streams and our rivers. And what I wanted to do and with the opportunity to talk with you today is share a local government perspective. So I've been in local government here in Colorado for 10 years with the cities of Westminster and Arvada. I currently work as the utilities director for the city of Arvada. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of Arvada history. So Arvada was platted in 1870. So we've been around a long time. We currently have a population of 120,000 people, which makes us the 7th largest city in the state. We've been incorporated as a city since 1902. And I was brushing up on my Arvada water history, and I learned that Arvada was actually the first city to pass an ordinance to create the Metro Wastewater District. And that is a district that serves the entire Denver metro area with wastewater services. So it was Arvada that took the lead back in 1960 to create a coalition of folks that now water history and stewardship with water. I also wanted to mention that local government has a lot of responsibilities to implement the policies that James talked about, the Colorado Water Plan talks about. A lot of it is infrastructure. A lot of these decisions about infrastructure are made at the local level. How do you get this water supply from the streams and the reservoirs reliably and safely delivered to our customers, right? And for the cities I work for, our customers are those of you who want to make coffee in the morning, take a shower, do laundry, right? How do we make sure that there's the infrastructure that's in place to do that? And reflecting on 50 years, I wanted to point out that we are close to that on the anniversary of the Clean Water Act and also the Safe Drinking Water Act. So the Clean Water Act was the federal act that established much more rigorous wastewater treatment regulations. And a lot of the infrastructure that's in place in Colorado and across the country dates back to the early 70s, because that's when the federal government came in with regulations and a lot of money to invest. In 1974, a couple of years later, the Safe Drinking Water Act was passed. And same kind of model with the federal government coming in with a lot of funding and a lot of infrastructure dates to that time. So for the state of Arvada right now, we've got a plant that was actually built before those back in the 1960s. And then our newer plant was the 1980s. So at the local level, we are figuring out how to manage aging infrastructure and also build the capacity that we need for land development. The same thing we're doing at the local level. We're thinking about water quality. We want water to taste good. We want it to be safe to drink. We're thinking about drought resiliency and wildfire resiliency and affordability, making sure that that we're meeting folks where they are in a way that provides this key service that's still affordable to our neighbors. I live in Arvada too. I've lived there for 18 years, and so I get the chance to serve the community that I live in. And when I think about how we're doing these things, I think about my neighbors, my community, and my children who I'm raising there. If you look across the country, we've all seen the headlines about Jackson, Mississippi, and Flint, Michigan. You see boil water orders in the headlines, even here in Colorado. You see service interruption of water. You see water quality issues. And I want to point out, especially with this audience interest in public affairs, those kind of issues are not about technology. They're not, we know how to move water from A to B. I'm a professional engineer by training. We know how to treat the contamination that we need to. We know how to make it safe. So what's the gap? It's a lot of times it's a public administration resource gap. It's a gap in political will. It's a gap in financial capabilities. It's a gap in just the humans that are making these, the expertise of the humans of making these decisions. So as those of us who are studying public administration and public affairs, just remember that. Like, we've got the technology, but how do we bring that to our communities in a way that's affordable? A couple other things I want to touch on, and I think they speak to some of the high-level findings on the Colorado River. Conservation is a huge topic for us at the local level, and also drought resiliency. Do we, as the city of Arvada, of 120,000 people to serve, are we ready for the next extended drought? Do we have enough water? Have we done a good enough plan for that? And again, those are the kinds of decisions that get made at that local level. Another aspect of this that we really see locally is, what do you do with the water that's conserved? So we talked about the 6,000 acre feet, I think was the number that was conserved, and what do you do with it? And are we making decisions at the local level to use that water savings to support additional new plan development? Are we really saving it? Are we building more reservoir space or new reservoirs so we can really save it like it's in a savings account? Conservation is a huge message, but then where does it go? Is it going to help fill Lake Powell and Lake Mead? So again, those are the kinds of decisions that are made by city councils and water district boards. And I wanted to also point out that water rights in Colorado are complicated, and they also end up being administered in a lot of ways at the local level. So you may have heard first in time, first in right. You talked about that a little bit, James. So when you talk about first in time, first in right, the first folks who got to the river and said, I'm going to take this for my sugar beets or my celery. We were celery capital of the world in Arvada a while back. Or all of the fruits and vegetables that were feeding the miners in the 1860s. Those farmers claimed water rights, and those are the same water rights that we use for cities now. So some of the water rights we use date back to 1865, and because of that legal framework and because of that definition of ownership of water, it makes solving these larger challenges even more difficult. I haven't heard anybody say, yeah, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting, but that is absolutely something that you see when we're talking about water rights at the local level. We fight in water court. We fight for what we think is our share of water based on the water rights that we purchased. And part of the reason we fight is it's really expensive. So looking at planning a community, we estimate that an acre foot of water, which James described as a football field, a foot deep of water, we pay $40,000 per acre foot for that. So $40,000, and that serves 2, 3, maybe 4 homes. So for those of us who are thinking about housing affordability issues in the public administration sphere, that what that looks like is a $10,000 to $20,000 expense just for the water supply for a single family home. That doesn't include any of the infrastructure, the water treatment plants, the sewage treatment plants, the pipes, the pump stations, the tanks that it takes to deliver. So if you're looking at a single family home in this area, your water provider is looking at a dollar amount of $10,000 to $20,000 per home. So I've worked in Colorado water policy for over 20 years. I love it. I could talk for hours, probably like Ándie and James could. But I wanted to point out that having the state level strategy like this is incredibly important. It's essential for us as a state to have a plan and a vision for a sustainable future. And I wanted to say that so many of the decisions that implement this are with local governments and local boards and local officials. So we need great local policy in order to achieve these goals. Thank you.
Sharon, that was fantastic.
Thank you
so much.
Okay, my mic on? Okay. So going back, I'm going to tie together how I'm connected to water in these two up here, and then I'll just jump into one of the basins that I've done most of my work in my adult life. But if you remember James' slide with the basins, I'm from a small town where that green basin was, the Rio Grande. The headwaters is in the northern part of the San Luis Valley, goes all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. I grew up there and came up to school in the metro area and lived all over the country, and grew up in a time where there were signs everywhere saying AWDI, stop AWDI. So water policy and fighting over water is deeply ingrained in me since my youth. There was a big trans-basin diversion effort in the 70s and 80s, and it was actually the first initiative I voted on when I could vote. Right? Are we going to trans-basin divert this water from the San Luis Valley to the metro area? And recently, there was another attempt to trans-basin divert from the San Luis Valley to Douglas County. Okay, so it resonated with me, like, let's unite and not infight in Colorado, right? There's some bigger powers that be outside. And so my work has been tied to conservation. It's been tied to distributing resource knowledge in the communities that I'm from. And, most recently with my SPA degree, it's a master's of public administration. And I did my capstone in the city of Lakewood, where I live now, to do organics recycling, because we have a 12% waste diversion rate in the suburb I live in. And it flabbergasted me with the infrastructure available in the metro area, how many people take advantage of that, right? Versus in the rural communities where we have the projects we've done there to divert waste when we have one landfill in 8,100 square miles. It's just this waste mindset is what I noticed in the metro area, right? And so this metro reclamation district that Sharon's talking about, it's actually in my capstone as one of the solutions for local city code, let's promote food waste disposers and analyzing what's the electrical consumption. So when we talk about this larger water problem, and it is a problem, it is a crazy. So it is doom and gloom, and some of us grew up in that. It is life. The whole tagline of this Colorado water plan, which has been in the works since 2015, is water is life, right? And there's this homage to the land stewards. And where I'm from, it has 12,000 years of human habitation, right? And people were forcibly removed from the land with Indian Removal Act in the 1860s. And the people that are there have my ancestry, that Indo-Hispano ancestry. And largely silent in this plan is diversity, equity, inclusion. The planners specifically say that this is absent. So when we talk about senior right users on the basins and in the Rio Grande being over appropriated, the surface water and the groundwater are both over appropriated. And we have downstream obligations. And you have, our largest export from the San Luis Valley is talent, is people. And so, you come back home to those issues, right? And what do those solutions look like in the community when you have this beautiful legislation from the 60s? You have Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, you have NEPA, you have all this wonderful environmental legislation that helps engage, in my view, equity and diversity legally. Like, you have some justiciable pieces in there in that legislation for socioeconomic and environmental justice. And it takes a lot of work at the local level. You have to engage. There's all these quasi-governmental layers from that federal legislation down to the states, down to in our communities, volunteer municipal leaders that wear many hats, and they're in charge of managing these drinking water and wastewater systems that are aging, that are, then are reclassified as GLUTI and require these $10 million solutions to treat water, which is perfectly acceptable to, use the infiltration gallery from rock. But since it's been reclassified by a regulator at the state level, like this is GLUTI, but you have to comply, right? So those are the barriers when we're talking about water planning, when we're talking about, okay, if you don't have surface water to augment what you're pulling from the confined aquifer, you're going to lose your ability to ranch. In the water plan, we have 90% of our consumption in the state is from ag, and then it goes down to munis like 7%, and then large industry 3%. And ag is our largest industry. It's the livelihood in the San Luis Valley and in other rural communities across the state. And so planning around that, you have to form like organizations, engineering consulting, and nonprofit, and then you liaise with the conservancy boards and the conservation districts and all the decision makers, and you do it all for free. So when we talk about this water planning solution, and we're silent to equity concerns, but a lot of the people that have been dealing with water their entire lives are not able to engage in this process. They're not able to take time and come to all these meetings and come to the water courts. And I've noticed that folks that are, losing their ability to ranch, the nonprofit community sort of circled around and formed a brilliant plan. Like, how can we replace some of these revenues? How can we protect, like, in the Western world, it's ecosystem resources, right? In some indigenous cosmologies, you're more tied to the environment. You're not separate from it. And so we're constantly crossing that bridge. But these planning efforts where you could say holistically, this is what we need to protect in this region. This is the water that we need to recharge. And then these are the folks that are losing their ability to ranch. They're losing their ability to pump. And then there's like a solar plan around that, right? To try to replace revenues. And you go into land use planning discussions and you try to adopt, okay, let's copy Alamosa County's land use codes and distribute those across the 6 counties in the San Luis Valley. Like, water touches everything. It's just not this myopic, okay, it is the center of life. It is the one thing we cannot live without, right? Like, we could live 30 days without food, I think 3 days without water. And it is a huge equity issue, especially, like, we are a headwater state. We are responsible to so many people downstream, not just for the quality of the water, but for the quantity of the water. And I like that idea of potentially, looking to each other to build this like collaboration and not have that urban rural divide that we do now. Because I notice a lot of local decision makers up here, they tend to focus on buy and dry solutions. If you look at Castle Rock and Rocky Ford, if you look, like, even in my own suburb, they're talking about, when I sit in on these planning discussions, the attorneys are sort of promoting that as a solution. It's like, how is that a solution for people in the rural community, right? How is, if they're losing their water there, they're essentially losing their ability to live the way of life that they've lived for generations. So it's a big problem. And I think that equity is largely silent in the plan is problematic. And it just creates more barriers for people from the rural setting. It creates equity issues, which have been endemic since we formed the state, since we had the territories like carved up, just to protect resources and to have that square easy for land management purposes. But I'd argue we should have carved them up with the basins. I love that map. Yeah, I think there might be less fighting, but So I think those are just over the years, over 2 decades of just tirelessly working and putting people in place to continue work, to build drinking water facilities and wastewater facilities and find the resources to do that, and mobilizing people to participate in planning discussions. And it's a huge lift. It's a huge lift because a lot of people don't get paid to lead in the rural communities. And I don't think that's just in the San Luis Valley. I think that's in a lot of rural communities across Colorado. So I love the water plan. I think there's solutions. I just, I don't have all the answers myself. So I've always just mobilized a lot of people. And I think that, I don't know, I am afraid. My son's in school in Las Vegas and he's always asking about surface water storage and if he could have a future there. And so I don't have all the solutions. I just know that I work on it daily. Like now I'm at EPA. I'm not supposed to be talking about, I'm not representing EPA today, but I do help plan environmental programming for the 28 tribes that are in EPA's Region 8, and part of those are clean water programs. And so I enjoy that. And I think up here, if we could just each focus on conservation, like maybe not have those giant lawns, have shallow roots, and not wash your car in the driveway when you have a reuse car wash just a block away that uses gray water. We could collect our rainwater now. Like everybody could do a little bit to conserve up here instead of being so. My observation is holistically up here, we're very wasteful with water, and it's scarce, and we're gonna, with all the markets popping up to bet and hedge on water scarcity and wanting to force fallowing, we need to do our part, because we're going to lose it. We are, if we don't each step up and do what we need to do. So yes, it's scary. So
Well,
that's it.
Yeah,
Amazing.
thank
Thank
you.
Okay.
And thank all three of you. Okay, folks. This is, we're all learning about this stuff. We have to look at this from various levels. James started at the kind of this high level, and we worked all the way down to local government, down to individual people that Ándie was talking about. Also, we have to think about this from a different dimension of time, and just the looking back that some of these laws and infrastructure goes back over 100 years, and this structures the system that we're in now and trying to respond to that. And throw on top of that, we have like a really diverse population of people, a lot of inequities right now that we need to deal with. Right? This is like, I know you ended on a positive note, James, but this is like literally like Ándie was saying, this is like a kind of a scary situation, right?
Absolutely.
And this is potentially a tragedy if we don't act. And so first of all, I want questions from the audience after this one, because we're, time wise. But okay, I want 1 or 2 strategies from all of you. What can we do? What type of leadership do we need? How do we resolve this tragedy? Because Sharon's right, it's not technological. We have the infrastructure, we have the science to solve this. It's people. How are we going to deal with this? And then let's start with James. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And inspirational comments from you both. And you're absolutely right. The diversity, equity, and inclusion in the water plan isn't there. There are a bunch of guys that look like me sitting around in Bishop's Lodge, New Mexico in 1922, no tribal representatives, no people of color, no gender equity. And they came up with this document that applied to every single person, whether they were in that room or represented in that room or not. And we can do better. This program is a example of how we can do better as a culture. So solutions. You got to work it from the supply side and the demand side. So I have one for each. The demand side, it's water conservation. We have to do more with less. There are people that don't like that because that can be perceived to be antithetical to growth. It doesn't have to be. We can whittle down our consumptive use, the water that's required in each of our homes, fairly substantially. I'll give you one specific example. I was up here whining about this with Sharon before the panel. It's gray water. You can take your master bath shower water today, put it in a near drinking water quality state in a unit that is commercially available today, it treats it to the standard called NSF 350, and then you flush your toilets with near potable drinking water instead of clean drinking water from your city or your whatever your water provider is. That could save 25% of the water necessary to come into a home. So that's just one example. Technology is getting better. We're getting better at detecting leaks. This stuff is old, Chris. It's 100 years old. It's leaky. We need, and we have these really cool devices that sense the vibration in a pipe and can tell you what type of faucet, what type of fixture you're running in your bathroom. That's how amazing the technology has progressed. And it can tell you where there's a leak or where you have a leaky toilet flap. I mean, it's amazing. Some of these apps will even call the plumber for you. So like there's all sorts of cool stuff, innovation on this, on the demand side. On the supply side, we have got to get better at how we manage our supply. We stick no water underground, relatively speaking, in Colorado because it has never penciled. It's always been cheaper to go do buy and dry. It's always been cheaper to go to the western slope and bring water from the headwaters of the Colorado River. It's been cheaper to do almost anything other than aquifer storage and recovery. I think the time for that, us to take out our pencils again and sharpen them and figure out whether or not that works is here. And we can do it. It isn't what we've done in the past. And there are people in our world, in the water world, especially if we lack diversity, equity, and inclusion, that resist anything that doesn't look like the status quo. And that's a problem. We've got to think creatively, innovatively on the supply and the demand side. So, you know, specifically, I would focus on those two as potential solutions.
Right, Sharon.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to follow your lead. I've got a supply solution, demand solution, and I'm going to respond at the local level, what's in our control as local municipalities, local government leaders, special district leaders. On the supply side, I'm going to put a plug in for storage. You said specifically aquifer storage and recovery. We are seeing ambitious reservoir projects happening now. So if you look up in Northern's area, up in northern Colorado, they're working on the Chimney Hollow project. Arvada and Denver Water are partnering on an expansion of Gross Reservoir. When we have wet and average years here in Colorado, especially here on the Front Range, we actually have more water than we can store. That water is going down the South Platte. That's water's going toward Nebraska. If we had more storage for the Front Range and Eastern Slope, if you will, water rights, if we had storage projects, we would be able to weather drought better. So I would offer that a commitment to more surface water storage is an important solution we need to look at.
Sharon, just piggyback and reinforce that.
Yes. Oh, you
Every
agree.
acre foot of water, every gallon of water you conserve has got to be backed up with storage. Otherwise, you've conserved it for Nebraska, which I don't have anything against Nebraska, but we need to be able to use efficiently and effectively our water here. We have 9 interstate compacts and 2 equitable apportionment decrees that dictate that 2/3 of our water has to leave our state anyway. So they're protected down there. They're going to get their water, or they're going to sue us, and they have. But just I want to reinforce your point about storage, because you have to have that commensurate amount of storage if you're going to conserve, and that's something that a lot of times you don't hear in the environmental discussion. So anyway.
Thank you. Yes, it's like saving money, but not having a savings account to put it into. So, so the storage is our savings account. The storage is the water that's going to get us through the drought time. So thank you for the comment on that. I'll give you specifics on what Arvada is doing. We've partnered with Denver Water. We are investing $120 million of our community's funds to help contribute to the expansion of Gross Reservoir, and that'll give us another 3,000 acre feet. So when I used the $40,000 per acre foot estimate earlier for value, that's what our direct experience is. And I think if you talk to other communities around, 40,000 is actually pretty good. So it's It's the political will and the understanding of the role of storage and the commitment to fund those projects and get them moving. This Gross Reservoir project has been in the works for over 20 years. And I'm gonna also on the demand side, give a plug for technology. If any of you wanna check out on the App Store, there is an app called Eye on Water, just like it sounds, Eye on Water. And many of the communities in Colorado, including Arvada, are rolling out smart water meter technology. And I am piloting one at my house. And my favorite part is that it will send me a text message if I have a leak. So if my teenager doesn't shut the shower off the whole way and it's dripping upstairs, I get a message saying, hey, check for a leak. And for our community, we've historically sent a water bill every 2 months. And so many of our customers with a leak, that's the feedback time frame. Like they could have a leak for 2 months until they get a bill. So with this technology, there's near instantaneous data available. And as we roll it out to the community, which is an initiative we're doing this year, what I'm excited about, it's going to help folks save money. It's also going to help us with inefficiencies through leaks. Because if you're pinged by email or text message that you got a leak in your house, you're going to want to go fix it. You're going to want to go find it. So thank you for the question.
Yeah. So I think for me, I've thought about this most of my life, and I've always wondered, why there's that disconnect with how certain communities treat water separate from themselves instead of integral. So I'd like, I guess, just to urge everybody to examine that, like how, because it's a gap for me assimilating into city life, that water is treated as a resource versus as core to who you are as a person connected to this space. Because I think if you assimilate that somehow into your belief system, you treat it differently. You really do. And because it hurts when you hurt. It hurts when you're like, I'm destroying my own life here if I'm destroying this water, right? And for me, storage is the biggest. I mean, we have the natural hydrogeology already in place. It's always, you have to have that 3 bottom, instead of just income and losses, you need to think of how are you distributing impacts and benefits if you're really looking at equity. And we have the natural structures there, right? We're depleting them. We're drawing down all of our confined aquifers. So it's there. Let's just recharge them, right? But that absolutely has to be first. And then I think if you challenge your mindset for how am I consuming water, then you have something to put into storage. If you do look at just your daily uses, like am I washing my car in the driveway? Am I running the water while I'm brushing my teeth? Am I not reclaiming what's coming down outside? Am I just letting all the shower water go? Like, how are you using water daily? And then start there. And for me, it's painfully slow progress, even in my own family. Like I'm constantly turning off water. I'm constantly, just reminding people it's a struggle to re-landscape. How are you landscaping your home? Are you using native vegetation? There's tons of resources at CSU Extension, at UCD, like all of the natural resource departments have how to sort of landscape here. You don't have to landscape without vegetation. Just some of the native vegetation have very, very deep roots that use less water, right? That use less surface water. And I think if you just ask yourself, how am I engaging with water? And then also be engaged with the decision makers so they could hear your concerns. I mean, I am at so many public meetings and they're always the same players. It's like 5 people in the city of Lakewood that are always at meetings, or the same thing in the Sun Luis Valley. It's just, you have to carve out time. It's just the way we're structured. We're a democratic republic. We're a capitalist economy. Like, and that's your vote. It's voice, right? You need to show up. And if you're not going to show up and do any of those things, I would at least focus on just examining today, how do you interact with water and what can you do individually? Because there's a lot of people in the metro area, and if we each shift our behavior, it sort of grows exponentially of what we're, at least on the consumption side, what we're avoiding using. Because it is a very scarce amount of water we have. So that's about it.
Awesome. We are running low on time. We have a lot of good questions here, and some have already been answered. I thought you all kind of foreshadowed some of the questions that were asked. And by the way, Sharon, I think and maybe James, someone needs to study the amount of acre feet lost by teenagers not turning things off.
I know.
And taking long showers.
Right, showers.
I don't know how to, that's a lot. We should have a smart meter telling us.
Publicly shame.
And we don't have a lot of time to write, but a couple of things. One is, are we going to go to basically moving to full treatment of our wastewater for drinking? Do you think that'll happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's happening.
It's happening.
I think it's happening. Direct potable reuse is a term that you're starting to hear in the industry. It's actually been around for probably 20 years in terms of having the technology that safely provides treatment from wastewater and can make it high enough quality to meet all the federal and state drinking water standards.
How much acre feet do you think that'll save us?
Oh, well, it depends on if you can use it. So I want to talk about water rights. So in Arvada, it would be exactly 0 because we have an obligation to return water to the river. And so under certain obligations we are not actually allowed to do that. If you
And
look
that's true generally.
Yeah.
If you go put your shovel in the river over here in Cherry Creek and divert water out, you're legally allowed to do that as a Colorado citizen under our Constitution. But you are junior, very junior. You have a
Yeah.
2023 water right. And that means you're probably not going to be in priority, maybe ever, unless there's a lot of water coming down that river. And that means that you have a one-use rule. You
Yep.
can put it on your field, you can put it in your house, you can use it in that house, in that structure. But the minute it leaves that structure and goes out into your lawn or goes into the gutter or the sewer system, that becomes somebody else's resource that is maybe senior to you and downstream of you. So that's the rule. That there's an exception to that rule. And that is if you, through your capital and your time and your energy, move that water out of another basin and bring it over here. So the Colorado River water that was talked about that's being stored in Gross Reservoir is capable of being used over and over again, because the way the law thinks of the resource is, but for your effort, that water never would have been in that basin. So you get to use it over and over again until you extinguish the molecule and consume it fully. And that's kind of what you've got to play with. So if you've got renewable water, if you've got reusable water, you can do the recycled water game and
Yeah.
direct potable reuse. We do it on space station. It works. People don't get sick up there. So it's doable. It's just, do you have the right class of water?
Do you have it's back to water rights, back to, first in time, first in right, and the rules that go with it. So.
All right, we're basically out of time. Let me ask one more question. We are celebrating our 50 years here at CU Denver. Hooray. Prediction, 50 years from now, where are we on this? Go ahead, James, you start us.
Oh, you're so sad.
50 years from now, we are in a vibrant front range economy that has managed its resources so well that we've put the water away that we've been talking about up here that we've conserved. We've gotten really good at conservation and direct potable reuse and gray water use. And we have welcomed people like all the people in this room, unless you happen to be Ute, Cheyenne, or Arapaho heritage. We're welcoming people to this state. We're not shunning them. We're not shunning investment from other places that aren't here. Believe it or not, that's in our business. There's some people that want to say you can't bring your money or your person here. We've got to get away from the idea that this is an exclusive place to be and we're going to shut the door behind us, right? Like, the not in my backyard mentality's got to go away. So in 50 years, we're going to face that down that beast, and we're going to figure out a way to make all that work without any problem.
All right, love it. We're writing this down. We'll come see you.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm gonna start with shame. In 50 years, we will be too ashamed to feel like we can just drive by that broken sprinkler head that is wasting all of that water that's flowing in the gutter, somebody's broken irrigation system, spraying into the street. We've all seen it, spraying on the sidewalks, because we value that precious resource too much to just let that be our status quo. And it is today, sadly. But in 50 years, it won't be.
Great.
In 50 years, I hope that we've healed some of our dysfunctional behaviors around here. I think we could use a healing model to get to where we need to be. So that's my hope for the future.
Well, that's awesome. All right, folks, we are out of time. Please join me in thanking these three excellent panelists. I also want to thank you for supporting the School of Public Affairs and CU Denver. I was actually mistaken. I was corrected. James, you teach for our NPA program.
I do.
Which means he does have a connection, but there's always the PhD program, so we'll talk later about that. And Sharon, of course, good luck with your capstone defending in 2 weeks, which is awesome. And Ándie, so appreciate everything you've done for the program too. And thanks for showing up. Grab some food, coffee, and keep chatting. And yeah, we'll see you the next first Friday. Oh, one more thing. I also have run another seminar series called the Herrick Roth Community Seminar Series on Democracy. Mark your calendar, April 27th. We have Adam Kaplan coming in, an amazing person who basically supports the development of democracy around the world with USAID. He'll be in this room, April 27th. Show up. It'll be around 4:30 or so, 5 o'clock starting.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
That was fun. Thank you for doing that.